Today, we're jumping into a legal case that honestly feels like it's straight out of a movie. It's a story about secrets, love, and how a single missing piece of paper could threaten to erase a marriage completely. I mean, think about that. Can something as huge as a marriage just vanish from a legal perspective because the paperwork can't be found? It really gets to the core of what makes a marriage official. Well, let's dive into the story of one woman who had to find out the hard way. So let's meet our main character, Angelina M. Castro. And, like so many of these fascinating legal cases, this one didn't start in a courtroom. It started with a very personal, very private choice she made many, many years ago. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's back in June of 1970. Angelina secretly marries a man named Edwin Cardenas in a civil ceremony. She lets him handle all the paperwork. They don't even live together at first, not until the next year when Angelina finds out she's pregnant. But their life as a couple was, wow, incredibly short. They split up after only 4 months. Not long after, a daughter was born, who was then adopted by Angelina's own brother. So for a long, long time, that chapter of her life was basically closed. But then, years later, Angelina wants to move to the United States to be with her daughter. And to do that, she had to get her marital status sorted out, and that meant, you guessed it, confronting that secret marriage from all those years ago. She gets a lawyer, and as they're going through the documents, one little detail just jumps off the page. Her marriage contract, the official proof of that day, it clearly states that the marriage was based on license number 3196182, supposedly issued in Pasig on June 24, 1970. And this right here is where the whole story pivots from a personal drama into a full-blown legal mystery. See, Angelina couldn't even remember applying for a license, so her lawyer starts digging, trying to answer one very simple question. Was that license number even real? And boom! This is the piece of paper that changes everything. Her lawyer gets an official certification from the senior civil registry officer in Pasig, and it says, point blank, that after a thorough search, license number 3196182, well, it just couldn't be found. It did not appear in their records. So with this certification in hand, Angelina files a petition to have her marriage declared null and void. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Nope. What happens next is a legal tug-of-war, with two different courts coming to two totally opposite conclusions. First up, the regional trial court. They actually denied her petition. The judge basically said that this certification, it just wasn't enough proof. And the court's logic is pretty interesting. Just because you can't find a document, that doesn't 100% prove it never existed. I mean, papers get lost, right? They get misfiled. So Angelina appeals, and the Court of Appeals, well, they saw things completely differently. They reversed the lower court's decision. For them, that certification from the official keeper of the records was absolutely sufficient proof. They declared the marriage null and void from the very beginning. But hold on, it's still not over. The government itself, the Republic of the Philippines, decided to appeal that reversal. Their argument was that the legal presumption of a valid marriage is incredibly strong and you can't just overturn it that easily. So the case was now headed for the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. So this is the really fascinating puzzle the Supreme Court had to solve. How do you legally prove that something, in this case a marriage license, never existed? It's a classic legal problem, right? You can't exactly produce a document that isn't there to prove it isn't there. Well, it turns out the law has an answer for this. It's a specific rule of evidence called proof of lack of record, and it's actually pretty straightforward. If the official who's legally in charge of certain documents gives you a written statement saying, hey, I did a diligent search and I found nothing, then that statement itself can be used as evidence that the record just doesn't exist. And that is exactly what the Supreme Court decided. They held that the certification from the Pasig civil registrar had real probative value. Now, in plain English, that means it wasn't just some administrative note. It was credible, powerful evidence that was good enough to prove a key fact. That license was never issued. The Supreme Court's logic here was just so clear. They broke it right down. First, they said a marriage license isn't just a formality. It's an essential requirement. Without it, a marriage is void from the get-go, like it never legally happened. Second, who's the official keeper of these records? The civil registrar. So it follows that a certification from that specific office is the best evidence you can possibly get. And all of that led them to their final conclusion. This certification was strong enough to beat the very powerful legal idea that all marriages are presumed to be valid. So the huge takeaway from this case, Republic versus Castro, is this. Yes, the law really wants to believe a marriage is valid. But that belief, that presumption, isn't untouchable. It can be defeated if you have clear, credible, official evidence, like that certification of due search and inability to find, from the right government office. Now, this decision wasn't just a personal victory for Angelina Castro. It actually had a huge, lasting impact on family law and the rules of evidence in the Philippines. What this ruling really did was create a clear legal playbook. For one, it tells you exactly what you need to do to challenge a marriage's validity on the grounds of a missing license. Two, it gives real power to a certification of absence, turning it into a serious legal weapon. And maybe most importantly, it reinforces the idea that the basic requirements for marriage aren't just bureaucratic red tape. They are the absolute foundation of the entire legal institution. And that brings us back to the beginning with a question for you. Angelina Castro's story is a powerful reminder of how our most personal moments are tied to public records. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How sure are you about the paperwork that defines your life? And what would happen if one day someone went to look for it and it just wasn't there?